The Blaze Radio Network. On demand. Glenn Beck.
Something big happening in the Meriden Township in the police department today. This is up in Michigan. They're going to publicly apologize to one person today. Even though the apology is 14 years too late, they are apologizing. They're apologizing to Breanne Randall Gay. She filed a complaint with the police department many years ago against the disgraced USA gymnastics doctor Larry Nassar. This was in 2004. They heard her complaint, but did really nothing about it. She said he touched her inappropriately during a routine exam. The police department investigated, and they talked to Nassar, and they took his word because he's a doctor. And he claimed she's 17. She doesn't understand the medical treatment. She's not comfortable with her own body, and they believed him, and they dropped the case. If someone would have believed Breanne that day instead of the doctor, how many assaults would have been prevented? If it could have stopped more than decades worth of emotional and physical torture for so many girls. But no one stood up for Breanne, and Larry Nassar went on to sexually assault more than 100 girls under the guise of medical treatment. For the last couple of weeks, famous faces have lined up in the courtroom, patiently waiting to speak about their assault at the hands of Nassar. He was ultimately sentenced to 40 to 175 years in prison, and I hope he gets every day of the 175. Let's keep him alive. He pleaded to criminal sexual assault involving the girls under the age of 16. He is a despicable human being that deserves his sentence. But the biggest tragedy is how many people were aware of this situation. Why didn't somebody speak out? And hats off to the press. If it wasn't for investigative press that actually cared, they would have never gotten to the bottom of this. I think the biggest lesson we can learn from this story, and from the so many people that have come out in the #MeToo movement, is what Dietrich Bonhoeffer said: not to speak is to speak. Complicity in evil acts is evil itself. It's why the First Amendment is so important, and it's not about stupid, foolish things. We all have to do a better job at being brave and speaking up and speaking out, no matter what the consequences are, when we know something isn't right.
It's Thursday, February 1st. This is the Glenn Beck Program.
Yesterday, I had my research team go in and look at the couple of stories that the president told during the State of the Union address, because I thought they were really powerful. And he told two stories of illegal immigrants, two stories. And the press and everybody else yesterday spent all day yesterday talking about how he is racist because he thinks that all Dreamers are gang members. That's not what he said. He didn't even get anywhere close to saying anything like that. Now they're saying, he's taking all these people as hostages. As hostages, he is offering you a pathway to citizenship, which is what you've all said you've wanted. So I asked the researchers, I said, could you give me a little bit more on two of these stories? And I want to show you, this is what America understands that the press and the parties refuse to. It's not that they can't. It's self-imposed. They're smart enough, but they refuse to recognize the difference. Let me tell you two illegal immigrant stories. The first one involves the two girls in Long Island. They were best friends, and it was September 13th. It was 2016. It involved Kayla Cueva, she's 16, and Nisa Mickens, she was 15. They were hanging out one night in September and they were hanging out at her house, Kayla's house. It was an ordinary Tuesday evening. They were students at a place called Brentwood High School in Brentwood, Long Island. And Kayla had been having some troubles with the local MS-13 gang. Not something that you mess with. And while she was having problems, Nisa always had her back. They had exchanges on social media with MS-13, but they were speaking out because something was wrong. So they're over at the house. It's 8:30 at night. They decide to go for a walk, and I'm sure they do what all girls do at their age. They talked about boys. They talked about school. They talked about basketball because Kayla was getting ready to try out for the varsity team. I'm sure they talked about Nisa's birthday plans because she was turning 16 the next day. As they're walking down the street, behind them, a car pulls up, and it's MS-13 gang members. And they call in to the head of the gang, and they say, hey, we just spotted these two. Can we take care of them? And the gang leader says, yeah, absolutely. So they pull up right behind them. The car stops, and these guys jump out, and they have baseball bats and machetes. Now, here are these two 15 and 16-year-old girls all by themselves. They grabbed Nisa first. They bludgeoned her repeatedly with the baseball bats and the machetes. Police show up later and said we couldn't even. They beat her face so badly that we couldn't even recognize her. Kayla runs. She escapes. She hides in the woods behind a house. She's 50 yards away from her friend, who is just now laying dead in the street, beaten to death. The guys are faster. They overtake her. They grab her, throw her to the ground, and they beat and then hack her to death. It took 6 months, but these guys were finally arrested. 3 of them were illegal immigrants. Kayla and Nisa's parents were at the State of the Union, and it was Kayla's mom who said, I am not here for anybody's political gain. I just want what's right to be done. Everyone should put their political agenda aside and think about what's going on in our country. Now, what's going on in our country? We have open borders, and we don't want people coming here illegally. We need to make sure that we know who's coming into our country. That has nothing to do with hating Hispanics, saying that all people who are immigrants are gang members. You're living in the 1900s if you think that's what this story is about. That's not what this story is about. We don't want criminals. We don't want gang members coming over here and killing our children on the streets. It's pretty simple. That has nothing to do with dreamers. These guys were not dreamers. They were killers. Now let me give you a second immigrant story. This was not billed as an immigrant story, but another story from the State of the Union. This one was about a 13-year-old boy named Ji Song Ho. The year was 1996, and he was living in North Korea. He was living, I didn't even say living. He was trying to survive the famine in North Korea. The famine, he lived with his parents, his younger brother, his sister, his grandmother had already died from starvation. We found out later that Kim Jong-il actually starved this whole region of his country, kind of like the Russians did. Communists like to do this. They just starve people to death. They cut off all of the food, and death was closing in on this kid's family. They were living off of corn stalks, not corn stalks and roots. His family spent most of the day just lying on the floor. They were too weak to stand. But he was in charge of going out and finding food or finding something that they could possibly trade for food. And he would wait in the middle of the night in freezing weather, and he would wait for the right time to raid the coal train. The only time the trains weren't guarded by armed police was the pre-dawn hours. And so when the train would move out of the station at night, all of these starving people would run out of the shadows and they would crawl up on top of the coal car, and they would bring these little bags or whatever they had, and they would put a couple of handfuls of coal in, and they would throw it down off the track to somebody who was part of their family, and they would take that coal and they would exchange it for food. That's the only thing that kept them alive. Well, he got up and he grabbed his sack, he tossed it down, and then he fell. He didn't just fall, he fainted from hunger. And he fell down in between the cars and onto the tracks, and the train was moving. He said he woke up to the sound of his sister screaming in horror for help. All of these starving people that were on the train just to get food, they all came to his aid. He said he felt the warmth of his blood spilling out. The train had taken an arm and a leg as it ran over him on the tracks, but it wasn't clean at all. These starving people picked him up. They could all barely walk, they were so weak. And they brought him to a doctor in the town. It's not a hospital, it's just a guy. He had no medication at all. He couldn't dull the pain, and he said, "I've got to saw your arm and your leg off cleanly." He said he could feel his spine rattling with the teeth coming across. He somehow or another survived, and his weak father fashioned 2 wooden crutches, and he depended on those crutches just to beg in the streets. He couldn't do anything. When he was 17, he managed to illegally cross into the border in China. He found an underground church there where Christians gave him food. He said the animals are fed better in China than North Koreans are. You'd think he has a chance to escape. He's with people who will feed him and care for him. He's missing an arm and a leg. He took that food back over across the border so he could feed his family. That's when they caught him. They took him into prison for 20 days and they tortured him. That's when he realized there is no life, there is no future for North Korea. He waited 6 years, and G and his younger brother escaped again, and they made it into China. They planned to travel to South Korea, but he said, "I'm going to slow you down and we're going to get caught. Please go in front. Just go." He went by himself. He wound his way through China. He found Christians there that would help him. He had to go through the jungles of Laos on crutches. He finally goes into Thailand. He makes it. He finds his way to the South Korean embassy in Bangkok, where the officials say this ghost-like appearance of a man just showed up. They transferred him to Seoul, where he spent time in the hospital, and then they fitted him with an artificial arm and leg. He was reunited in Seoul with his brother. A few years later, they managed to smuggle out their mother and their sister, but G's father was caught escaping, and they tortured him to death in prison. He's an illegal alien. He crossed the border in China. He crossed the border of Laos. He crossed the border of South Korea. He was there illegally. Do you think the South Koreans were talking about him as an illegal alien? Do you think if he would have made it on a boat to our shore, do you think we would have said to him, "Get out of here. There's nothing here for you. You got to come through the front door"? We would have embraced that man because that man was escaping a horror. There are people that are trying to get to America from South America, from Mexico, that are trying to escape the horror of whatever is happening in their town because it's absolute lawlessness. Do you really think Americans want to shut the door on those people? We don't. Do you see there's a difference between a guy like G and the two guys that were gang members from MS-13? Don't you think? Can't you see a difference between those two? Can't you see a difference between somebody even coming here illegally who were just trying to escape poverty because they had no opportunity for their kids back where they lived? And so with an open border and with administrations time and time again basically encouraging people, we're not going to do anything. You don't think you would cross that border if your kids had a chance to better themselves and actually live like Americans do? Conservatives and liberals, we're not heartless. Americans have a bigger heart than just about anybody else. We just want to know who's here. That's it. And if you are if you are one of the poor, huddled masses yearning to breathe free, we will give you a chance. That's the only promise America gives. A chance to prove to yourself and to others, I am not what the last place said I was. There is something in me that is special. That's who we want here. And I think America is tired of the games. And I do not think that the average Democrat in the middle of the country is looking at these two guys, these three people, these two stories. I don't believe that they just think, oh, look at that. He's calling all immigrants gang members. No, he's trying to show compassion for both the people that live here in America that are killed, slaughtered in our streets by people who should not be here, and showing you an immigrant with great progress that is being slaughtered in his own country.
Glenn Beck.
That's an interesting point you made with the two stories from the State of the Union. I don't think I've heard anyone talk about the one from North Korea being an immigrant story.
It's an illegal immigrant story.
And there was a moment there, I will be honest with you, where I was like, is Glenn about to say that he thinks we should allow illegal immigrants to stay here? What is that? But in reality, it shows the truth, which is it's not that we're against people coming to our country. It's not that we're against people from other cultures joining us. We like that. We love that here in America. But we want to have the ability to make a determination between the guy escaping North Korea and the guy who's in MS-13. We need to have that ability. We need to have some process there.
They both are illegal immigrant stories. I don't want the gang members. Right. I do want the guy with one arm and one leg who's never really going to do anything except remind us how great freedom is.
Beck, Mercury. This is the Glenn Beck Program.
Welcome to the program. Glad you're here. I want to try to get to this. I don't know if we're going to get to it today, but the Clark County coroner has refused to release the coroner's report on the Las Vegas shooter. This was a court order release, and they said they're not releasing it because it hasn't been finalized. Well, okay. First of all, it's been 5 months. How are you not? What do you mean you haven't finalized the coroner's report? Especially since it's been, I think, 4 months since they cremated the body. What are you doing? Putting the ashes back together? How do you not? How is that not done? There's nothing new you can look at. You burn the body up.
If you had enough Flex Seal tape, maybe you
could. Yeah,
I don't know.
By the way, I saw on Pat Gray Unleashed yesterday. They did an attempt to see if the Flex Seal commercial can be recreated with the actual Flex Seal products.
Which you knew wasn't possible.
It went exactly the way I pictured it would go.
Yep.
What did you do?
Yep.
What did you do?
Well, you've seen the Flex Seal.
Yeah, that's the one where they take a screen door and they make it into a boat.
Boat in half.
Yeah, right. Okay.
So we decided to test it not on a boat, but we did the bucket test where they have that massive hole in it and the water's gushing out the side. And he takes maybe a 2-inch square piece of Flex Seal tape, slaps it on as the water's gushing out, instantly sealed. I'm like, that can't happen. That cannot happen.
Please tell me you didn't do this in one of my studios.
I didn't do it in one of your studios.
You did it in that outside area,
Right,
remember,
that-
Pat?
yes.
Oh, that was
It's called electrocution,
Place
Pat.
outside in the grass.
Right.
So we took a garbage can and I put a knife hole in it. Just a knife hole. So, real thin
Is this
slice.
a garbage can that
Yeah.
you paid for?
Yes. I have since paid for the garbage can.
All right, okay.
So it's got this little leak in it. We slap on Flex Seal, continues to leak. Put on another piece of Flex Seal, continues to leak. Slap on another one, continues to leak. And then we sawed that container in half. And we taped it back up with Flex Seal, and it completely leaked.
the whole time.
Whole
Every
time.
single test they
Every
tried
single test failed.
was a big, giant failure.
So you're saying one of those commercials that says, "But wait, there's more," isn't honest?
Isn't quite honest.
But
Holy cow.
they keep showing it, and I
Over and
watch
over
it,
and
I think
over.
to myself, they're showing the tape stop the
You guys
gushing.
are-
It has to
Can
work.
I tell you something?
Yeah, I know.
You guys are missing something big here. I think I think you did it wrong because I don't know if you've read this, but Chip Gaines is leaving the show.
Oh my God!
That's
for what?
right. Well, he's joining his
actually
wife,
is.
isn't he?
No, she's doing some face cream thing.
Oh,
It's Flex Seal.
He's going to Flex
He's
Seal?
going to Flex Seal.
Flex
He's going to be
Seal.
building houses with Flex Seal. So I'm pretty sure that's true.
I will tell you that came up on my TV yesterday. I was glued to it. No pun intended. I was sitting there watching that. I had to find out
I
if
know,
the Flex Seal worked. I was
right?
totally mesmerized by that segment.
What's
yesterday.
interesting is a lot of listeners were tweeting out that it was coming up, and Flex Seal actually liked the.
Oh no!
And I'm like, and you don't want to like this because you don't want people looking at this demonstration. I know it's not going to work, and of course it didn't.
really
it just didn't. So
You should get Flex Seal on.
I'd
if
like
they
to.
liked it,
I would too. Yeah.
You should tweet them and say, "Hey, Flex Seal,
Come
did
on.
we do
What did we
something
do
wrong?
Yeah,
Come
I'm
in here.
definitely
Do
willing
it.
to do
Yeah.
that. Definitely willing to do that.
All right. So Pat Gray from Pat Gray Unleashed is joining us. Pat, maybe you can help me out. I asked Stu an hour ago if you could come up with. I cannot think of any other president doing this, but let alone that, I cannot think of anything that I can compare with Barack Obama on what Donald Trump did at the State of the Union. He took the number one thing that the Democrats wanted, DACA, timesed it by, 3?
yeah.
Then offered a path to citizenship. So he took everything they wanted, and he led with it and said, that's pillar number one. Knowing,
Over the wall.
Right. Knowing that everybody who supports him, pillar number one should be the security, secure the border. Then we can talk about that. He didn't do that. He put their priority first and said, now, I've just given you something that my side's not going to like. Now you have to give us what your side doesn't like. Can you think of anything where President Obama reached out to the Tea Party people and said, look, okay, I want to talk to you about this constitutional thing. I want to talk to you about the one part in Obamacare that I agreed with you with when I was on the campaign trail, that it's unconstitutional and it would cause all kinds of problems, the individual mandate. I agreed with you. Now I'm in office. Everybody wants it. I'm going to give you one thing that is your hot button, but you're going to have to join me here. Can you think of any outreach at all?
No, but I can think of the opposite when he told Republicans they had to get in the back of the car because you
Right.
drove it into the ditch.
Right.
And now you're saying you want no, you're
We're
not
not
driving.
listening. We're not listening to you.
You're going to be in the back of the. You're going
Right.
to be in the back of the bus essentially.
Right.
Yeah. No.
I can't think of anything.
And I
don't
couldn't
think
of
he ever
anything
did.
either. Yeah, I don't think it ever happened. But luckily, we have a very large audience, and that audience had at least one person on Twitter who presented the opposing case.
Okay, give
this
it to me. I'd like this.
This is a story from Real Clear Politics by a liberal author trying to prove that Barack Obama was bipartisan. So therefore, you would assume this is the best arguments you got.
Sure,
right?
sure.
Okay. It says, yes, Obamacare passed without any Republican support, but that's the single example of purely partisan legislation in the Obama era. Every other bill signed by Obama came with at least one Republican vote.
Well, that's
now,
not,
first
wait,
of all,
That's not the same thing, sorry.
No, it's not
Wait.
at all.
That's not the same
It's
thing.
not the same standard. By that standard, by the way, the 20-week abortion ban was not only bipartisan, but 3 times as bipartisan.
it was overwhelmingly
Because they got
bipartisan.
3 Democrats on that one.
Right.
So, I mean, one vote from the other side is not a bipartisan bill. But
Right.
again, that's not the standard here. The standard is Obama
Did you reach out to the other side?
Did he reach out? Did he offer something that he knew his side would not like?
Right.
That was the number one priority of the other side.
Right. And then went above and beyond what they were asking for.
And then
Okay.
did 3 times as much.
Right. Okay. So here we go.
And put it first.
Bipartisan thing number 1 from Barack Obama. The Recovery Act, the stimulus plan. Why? Because they reduced the size of the package by $100 billion to try to make the compromise. Now, this is, of course, the right opposed the stimulus plan. Now, there were some moderate Republicans who went along with that there at the time. That's true. But it was a thing that started the Tea Party.
It really was. It was the bailout and the stimulus that started the Tea Party.
And again, let's look at the definition. Is the number one priority of the right spending $787 billion on a stimulus project? Now, it's a bad question to ask right now because the right seems to really want a $1.5 trillion. But certainly at that time, that was not their number one priority.
And, for this to be apples to apples, it would have to be he not only said, okay, we'll give up the stimulus package, the $787. But I'm going to give you $2 trillion in cuts.
But you have to give me something else.
But you have to give me health care.
So absolutely does not meet the definition of what we're talking about. Next up, the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform Bill
Oh my gosh.
is their big bipartisan because it had 3 Republican votes. Now, again, the 20-week abortion plan had 3 Democratic votes. I don't see anybody calling that bipartisan other than the president who's trying to make that case. And their other part, again, Wall Street reform was not the number one cause for the right at that time by any means. Next up, a bipartisan surveillance reform law, essentially an anti-Snowden law, where they came up with the extra spying and ability, and they made small concessions to privacy advocates. Okay, no.
Okay, so first of all,
these are not.
This has to be something that is the priority of the other side, and something that you're going to get killed for,
and something that's offered by the chief executive.
Yeah.
Right. So none of this stuff.
There's none of this
he
qualifies.
wouldn't even
He didn't
meet
offer
with
anything.
anyone.
Right.
He never sat down and met with a single person who was a constitutionalist and said, "Mr. President, here's what we're saying. Here's what we're saying." Never. He mocked us.
Yeah.
And so let me give you a couple more. They get good here. Now, the number one priority of the right, I think you'd all say, don't ask, don't tell. Because he worked with Susan Collins, who also wanted don't ask, don't tell. How is that even remotely close to what we're talking about here? Next up, a major food safety bill designed to give the FDA more power to recall tainted goods.
If that was
a number one priority of the right.
About that?
We talked about if we could just give
during the Obama administration.
If we could just give federal agencies more power, that's your.
And again, again, it has to be something your side doesn't want.
Correct.
Right? So, of course, his side wanted the FDA to have more power. Of course, his side wanted don't ask, don't tell.
Here's what this would be akin to. I'm going to cut the corporate tax rate to 15 or 20%, 21%. I'm going to cut the corporate tax rate, and I'm going to cut the capital gains tax. I'm going to cut both of those. My side is going to go crazy because they're going to say this is just a handout to big companies. They're going to go crazy. But in exchange for that, I want you on board with health care. If he would have made that, we would not have been able, I'm not saying that we would have taken that deal.
But it's a legitimate
offer. This is a legitimate offer. This is I'm going to take what you want and I'm going to times it by 3 and throw in something else that my side should kill me for, and I'm going to offer it. But you got to give me this border security, and not even the whole wall. You just have to secure the border for me, and we have to know who's coming in here. That is perfect. That is how you negotiate. That's how you negotiate.
Next up is the bill to reduce racially discriminatory disparity in mandatory prison sentences between crack and powder cocaine convictions. And this is true Obama-style bipartisanship, because there were conservatives. Mike Lee, I think, was one of them.
I'm one.
Who was very concerned about this issue. It was a ridiculous standard at the time. However, it is not something that his side didn't want. And this is what bipartisanship to Barack Obama is I will allow you to vote for the things that I want. I want this prison reform, and a few Republicans will come along with me, and I'll call it bipartisan. But you're not changing what you want. That's not a negotiation.
No,
that's just you doing what you want, and some people agree with you. That's totally different than what Trump is doing. Trump, unless you believe that Trump is a big-time amnesty guy, which you might, but unless you believe that, he's giving up something that is crucial to his platform.
Yeah, hang on just a second. Even if he is a big-time amnesty guy, that shows that he is willing to take on his own side.
Yeah, sure.
He's willing to take the hit because he believes it's right. And he knows, all of you have been in my office before I was president. I know I'm going to give you what we've all talked about. I'm going to give it to you. But you have to give their side, this side, you have to give them security. And it's perfectly reasonable to do that. And they call him a kidnapper now. They call him a hostage taker. It is unbelievable.
And what was it Obama always said? I'll listen to anybody reasonable from the Republican side. Reasonable to him meant
agreed with him.
Yeah. But I'm not going to listen to your extreme points of view. Well, an extreme point of view was the conservative side, was just something constitutional.
Constitutional. It's like
and that happened every time.
Yeah, an extreme point of view was we should not have the government mandate because that makes it an incumbent on every citizen to remain a citizen to buy some product. That's not in the Constitution. That should never be in the Constitution. You know what? You have to buy this cell service to be an American. No, I don't think so. I don't think so.
Pat Gray Unleashed. Hopefully some other TV products will be tested on today's program. You can watch it on the Blaze TV, listen on Blaze Radio, and on the podcast through iTunes and anywhere else you get them. It's the new year, and if you're like me, one of your resolutions is to get in shape. Every single year, it's the same resolution. It's 2018, and you want to look good. Your house has the same resolution. Yes, inanimate objects have goals too. You can help your home look its best with Overstock. For years, Glenn has trusted Overstock to make his home and our studios in Dallas look great. My wife and I love Overstock as well. We use it all the time. It's our go-to when we need to furnish our home. Overstock is not a discount house with last year's leftovers. They have beautiful new furniture and decor, all at Overstock prices. For this week only, Overstock is having their double savings event. There are thousands of deals up to 70% off, plus free shipping on orders over $45. Plus, when you use the offer code Beck, you'll get an additional 10% discount. It's Overstock's double savings event going on right now, only at Overstock.com. All things home, all for less. We love Overstock.com. You're going to love it too. Check it out, Overstock.com.
Glenn Beck.
FISA memo explained tonight at 5 p.m. only on the Blaze TV.
Please win, Eagles. Please win. Once before I die. Please win a Super Bowl. Please.
Go Patriots.
Glenn Beck. Mercury.